Welcome to the channel English Epics. I sat on the porch for the last time. I had just finished loading all my belongings into the car. There were 2 cardboard boxes and 2 suitcases. I had gotten rid of most of my other things over the past 6 years. I didn't want to take anything more than the bare essentials. In my purse was a copy of the final divorce decree and a check for half of all our assets. I saw my now ex-husband, John Simmons, sitting calmly in the living room, watching television. He didn't say goodbye, and it seemed he had no intention of doing so. That was probably for the best, because I don't think I wanted him to. I had taken back my maiden name when I finalized the divorce. I was Jean Parsons again. I had been waiting for this day for 6 years. It was the day my younger daughter Sarah left for college. That had been my commitment. We had 2 children, and Terry, the older one, had left for college 2 years ago. Sometimes it feels like I ruined everything just yesterday, and sometimes it feels like a lifetime has passed since I did. John and I met 20 years ago. I was working as a waitress at a diner, and John was one of our regular customers. He operated heavy equipment, bulldozers, and things like that. He was big and strong, decent-looking, very polite, and seemed to genuinely like me. At the time, I was still heartbroken over a failed high school romance. Ray Cotton and I had had a passionate relationship that lasted through all our high school years. When Ray left for the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, I was devastated. He came back the first summer, and we rekindled our relationship, but that was the last time I ever saw him. I heard that after graduation, he moved to Seattle, but I never had any confirmation of that. I was crushed. He was the love of my life. The only guy the first had ever loved, or would ever love, left me without a word of explanation. When John asked me out, it was the first time I had been with another man. John was a good person, and it was pleasant dating him. He was never too forward with me and never pressured me into anything. After a few dates, it became clear that he wanted to have sex, and eventually, we did. Shortly after that, John proposed to me. Honestly, I wasn't in love with John the way I had been with Ray, but I could see he would be a good provider and a decent husband. I married John for the wrong reasons, and that wasn't fair to him. Not long after, we had Terry and Sarah, and life was calm, if not exciting. Until 6 years ago, when Ray Cotton came back into my life. I was at the supermarket, just picking up a few small things, when I heard a familiar voice. Jean Parsons, is that you? I turned around, and my heart skipped a beat. I felt something I hadn't felt in nearly 15 years. It was Ray Cotton, and he looked better than ever. A little older, a little heavier, but just as handsome as I remembered. I was still angry at him for leaving me, but all those feelings vanished the moment I saw him. "Hi," was all I could manage to say. I just stood there, staring at him, not knowing what to do. Only knowing exactly what I wanted to do. I felt a strange flutter in my stomach, and my head cleared a bit. He finally spoke. "You look wonderful, just like I remember you." I wanted to say something witty, but all that came out was, "Thanks. You look good too." Ray motioned toward the food court, and we both headed that way. "What can I get you to drink?" he asked. "A Diet Cola will be fine." I sat there waiting for him, trying to figure out what to say. There was so much I wanted to know, but I didn't want to pry into his personal life. I felt young and nervous. Ray came back with the drinks, and we talked for almost an hour. Then we stood up and walked together out of the mall to his car, a big yellow Hummer. I said it was ridiculous, and we both laughed. We never discussed what we were doing. I simply got into the Hummer as if it were the most natural thing in the world. We drove to his motel, and I walked him to his room. Neither of us ever said what was about to happen. We just moved as if this was something we did every day. As soon as we were in the room, we fell into each other's arms. It felt just like high school, as if the last 15 years had never happened. I didn't think about my husband, my kids, or my life. In that moment, none of it mattered. We both laughed genuinely. I teased him about his thicker waistline, and he asked where my small, perky breasts had gone. It was all very playful, and in the end, we did what young lovers typically do. Ray and I took a shower together, and then he drove me back to the shopping mall. We didn't say goodbye. I just quietly stepped out of the Hummer at the back of the building and walked away. I finished my shopping as if I were floating through the air. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake the whole night, thinking about how wonderful the day had been. At home, I created the illusion that everything was normal. I tried not to seem too happy or carefree. I made sure not to look guilty. I paid close attention to make sure nothing appeared different. I made sure that nothing changed in my sexual relationship with John. I wasn't overly excited or demanding. The family had to remain stable, but that was the only thing that stayed the same. For the next 3 weeks, I spent every free minute with Ray. We only met during the day, while the kids were at school and John was at work. I never saw Ray on weekends. I would drive to the mall, enter through the front, and exit through the back where Ray was waiting. The first week, we always met at the motel, but after he rented an apartment, we went there instead. I was so caught up in what I was doing that I didn't think about my husband or my kids at all. I loved them deeply, but in those moments, they came second to my own pleasure. I knew I was wrong, but I didn't care. The problem was, my relationship with Ray had no endgame. Where were we going, and how long were we planning to keep doing what we were doing? We never thought beyond the next day. Then, it all came to an end. Ray and I met up, and instead of going back to his place, we drove to Lake Venona, where we used to go parking when we were kids. We stopped on the far side of the lake. It was quiet and secluded. In a matter of seconds, we were both undressed and in the back seat of the Hummer. We were going at it like a pair of teenagers when my cell phone rang. I let it ring a few times before answering. Hello? Jean, it's John. Yes, John, I recognize your voice. Where are you right now? I paused for a second, unsure what to say. I was a terrible liar. I'm in the supermarket parking lot, John. Why do you ask? Oh, well, that's good to know, Jean, because in 10 seconds, Ray Codden's Hummer is going to explode into a giant fireball. Lucky for you, you're not in it. John, what did you say, John? 10, 9, 8, 7. I dropped the phone. Get out. Get out of the car. Now. Hurry. Ray was stunned. What are you talking about? What's going on? I flung the door open and jumped out, completely naked. Ray followed, and we both ran away from the Hummer. Just seconds. Later, a loud pop rang out, and orange smoke started billowing from beneath the massive yellow truck. We were standing about 15 meters away from the smoking Hummer when John pulled up in his pickup. He threw open the passenger door and barked, "Get in." He looked at Ray through the window and said, "Next time I see you, it'll be at your funeral." During the long ride home, neither of us said a single word. When we arrived, I had to walk naked from the driveway to the front door. I stood in the living room, too afraid to move or speak. John finally looked at me. Go take a shower and put something on. Before the kids get home from school, it was a tense evening. John didn't say a word to me about what had happened. I went to bed terrified. He slept on the couch. The next morning, when I stepped outside to get the newspaper, I found my purse and clothes in a paper bag at the front door. I quickly took them inside and out of sight before John came down for breakfast. Before leaving for work, he loaded the box spring and king-size mattress into his pickup truck. When he returned that evening, he brought back 2 twin beds and several sets of sheets for them. He made one bed, and I put fresh linens on the other. This went on for nearly a week. One evening, when the kids weren't home, I finally gathered the courage to speak to him. "John, what do you want from me? What do you want me to do?" He didn't answer right away, just glanced up briefly from his reading. I waited. I didn't apologize. I didn't offer excuses. I didn't beg or cry. I just stood there, waiting for his response. "My first instinct was to kill you both," he said. "I was furious about what you did to our family, to me. I was going to strap 4 sticks of dynamite under his truck. But then I thought about the kids. They would have lost not just their mother, but their father too. And my revenge wasn't worth that. So instead," he continued, "I rigged it with a Marine Corps flare instead of explosives. I hoped it would scare you enough to make you stop. But you didn't. You never did. I couldn't take it anymore. I'm still angry and I struggle with it every single day. I don't know what I'm capable of when I'm in that state." I sat silently, listening to every word. I didn't say anything, and I tried not to show any emotion. John continued, "You'll stay here in the house and act as a mother and a wife until both kids leave for college. You'll perform all the duties of a wife and mother, except the sexual ones. That includes cooking, cleaning, laundry, grocery shopping, and attending all public events. We must appear to be a normal family at all times. Neither of us will say a word to family or friends about what happened. I'll give you a monthly allowance of $200 for personal expenses, and of course, I'll cover all household needs. The day Sarah leaves for college will be the day we get divorced. I'll give you half the value of the house and half of our savings. I won't pay you alimony." It felt like a prison sentence. I didn't know what to say. I sat there, stunned. Why didn't he just throw me out and be done with it? Why was he subjecting me to this kind of torture? John continued, "I'm doing this mostly for the kids. I want them to have a normal childhood, and I won't let your affair ruin their lives. I'm firm on this, Jean. There's nothing to negotiate. I know this is going to sound harsh, and it'll probably be difficult for you to accept, but please listen carefully to these last 2 conditions. They are very important. I was a little nervous, but I thought I could handle it. If you leave before fulfilling your obligations, I will find you and kill you. And if you ever have any contact with Ray Cotton, I will find you both and kill you." I was stunned. I couldn't find the words. I sat there trembling. I had no idea I had hurt this man so deeply. No idea he hated me this much. For the first time, I felt genuine remorse for what I'd done. I had been bold and arrogant during the affair, but now I was scared and shaken. He had found a way to get to me, and it worked. I stood up and looked at him. "I agree." That night, I cried myself to sleep. The next morning, I began fulfilling my obligations, and I did so for 6 years without a single complaint. I looked out the window again. John was still watching TV. As I walked to my car, I wasn't sure if I felt relief or just despair. I drove slowly across town to the small cottage I had rented. It was modest but cozy. Most importantly, I could afford it. I had ruined my life and paid the price for my mistake. John was a good man and deserved better than what I gave him. I was ashamed of what I'd done to him. Still, it was time to start over. As I turned onto the street leading to my new home, saw a car parked in the driveway. It was a large, ugly yellow Hummer. I first met Jean at the diner where I had lunch every day. She was bright and full of life, and I always looked forward to seeing her. Jean was a pretty girl and very popular. She was the kind of woman I never imagined myself dating. I was a big guy, though not fat, just an unremarkable heavy equipment operator. She was Miss Personality. I never thought I'd have a chance with someone like her, let alone marry her. Took everything I had to work up the courage to ask her out. If she had turned me down, it would have crushed me, though I was used to that. But in the end, I did ask her out, and she said yes. For several years, Jean dated a guy named Ray Cotton. They seemed to be very close, but at some point, he lost interest and just disappeared. She was heartbroken for a long time, and I kind of tried to help her pick up the pieces, I didn't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing. Honestly, I didn't care, because I was simply grateful for how everything turned out. The dates we went on were very dull. I had no experience with this kind of thing, and I was extremely cautious not to make any mistakes that might ruin our relationship. Of course, I had never had sex with a girl before, so in that department I was incredibly awkward. Eventually, thanks in large part to John, we did have sex. Everything I knew about it, I learned from John. I think I was a good student. I know I was enthusiastic. I did my best to meet any and all of her needs in that area. My only goal in life was to make her happy. It took me a long time to build up the courage to talk to her about marriage. John, would you consider moving in with me? John Simmons, are you asking me to move in with you or to marry you? Whichever one you're most comfortable with. Do you have a preference, John? Well, yes. I'd like to have children, and I think it would be better if we got married. But I don't want to rush you. That's a big step, John. Can I have a few days to think about it? Of course. I don't think you should rush. It's an important decision. That wasn't a good sign for me. I felt uneasy that she wasn't confident enough to give a simple yes or no right away. I had no choice but to give her the time she asked for. But why did she need to think about it? I wasn't happy about it, but I had no other option but to hope for the best. 2 days later, Jean accepted my marriage proposal. We were married for 14 years and had 2 children, a son, Terry, and a daughter, Sarah. My career was going well. We had a cozy home and a stable lifestyle. I thought everything was perfect. All the doubts I had felt at the beginning of our marriage had faded. I no longer felt like a second choice. Although our love life wasn't like something out of a movie or a cheap romance novel, I still believed everything was fine. That's when Jean started acting a little differently. I couldn't pinpoint anything specific, but something was off. The house wasn't neglected, but I knew things weren't as they should be. A few times, I called home during the day just to chat. The kids were at school. Most of the time when I called, Jean didn't pick up. She used to go grocery shopping once a week. Now it seemed like she was going every day, and shopping had never been something she particularly enjoyed, whether it was for food or clothes. After about a week of this crap, I decided to do something about it. I took a week off work. Each morning, I left the house and parked farther down the street so she wouldn't see me. Jean would get into her car and drive to the supermarket. I watched from the parking lot, and it was hours before she came back out and returned home. I did this for 3 days. On the 4th day, I followed her to the mall. She entered through the main entrance and exited through the rear. I tried to follow her, but it was too late. The next day, when she parked near the front entrance, I drove around to the back of the mall and waited in a hidden spot. A few minutes later, Jean appeared and walked straight to a large yellow Hummer. She got into the passenger seat, and they drove off. I wasn't in a position to follow them, and I lost them almost immediately. My suspicions were confirmed. The worst thing I could have imagined had happened. I was devastated. I have a temper, and it took everything I had not to lose it. I knew I had to stay calm about the whole thing. That was going to be difficult. Over the weekend, the kids and I were home, so I was sure she wasn't seeing him then. I arranged to take more time off the following week. I still don't know if I wasted 5 days or if they were the most important 5 days I ever spent. Over the weekend, I kept myself together. On Monday morning, I parked behind the supermarket in a spot where I could see everything, without being seen myself. I had borrowed a Range Rover pickup from a friend at work. The Hummer pulled in, and using my trusty binoculars, I memorized the license plate number. I remembered which exit they had used from the mall parking lot, so I positioned myself nearby. This time I did better. When they left the mall, I followed them, and 10 minutes later, they pulled into an apartment complex. They entered one of the buildings together. At that moment, I had no intention of going up to the apartment. I needed time to process everything I'd just learned, and to start putting a few plans in motion. Of course, we all have friends in certain positions who can run a license plate for us. The yellow Hummer belonged to Ray Cotton. What a surprise. After 14 years of marriage, that son of a bitch had found his way back into my life, and my rage was building. I spent the next day at home trying to figure out what to do. I had two wonderful children who had no idea their mother was an adulteress. I didn't want them to find out. Whatever I did, it had to be done in a way that wouldn't hurt the kids. I could use fear and anger to my advantage if I kept control of myself. I was a big guy, and I could be intimidating if I needed to be. One way or another, I had to put an end to the affair and make it seem, at least to the kids, like nothing had ever happened. Divorcing Jean at that point wouldn't get me what I wanted. Killing Jean or Ray wouldn't solve anything either. I had to force Jean to stay and continue being a wife and mother until the kids left for college. I decided to do it through fear and intimidation. That wasn't in my nature, but I had to make it believable. First, I needed to get their attention. My original plan was to place 4 sticks of dynamite under his Hummer and blow it up when they weren't inside it, of course. But federal laws don't look kindly on things like that, and going to prison wouldn't help anything. I decided a smoke flare could achieve the same effect without landing me behind bars. The local marine supply store had plenty of emergency smoke flares. All I had to do was figure out how to trigger one remotely. After a few nights in the basement, I finally figured it out. Using components from an old remote-controlled toy car Terry had outgrown, I was able to test the device easily, and it worked from more than 70 meters away. I was proud of myself. The week came to an end. The next one was approaching, and I had to take a bit more time off work. The weekend went fairly well, mostly because I finally felt like I was in control. Everything was supposed to come to a head by this time next week. Early Sunday morning, I went to Ray Cotton's apartment complex and discreetly installed my electronic flare device under his yellow Hummer. All I needed now was the right moment to activate it. The next day, I waited for them outside the supermarket. Instead of heading to his apartment, they drove north. It was easy to follow them without being seen. They seemed so preoccupied with each other. They wouldn't have noticed me even if I were in a fire truck. They drove out to Lake Venona, circled, around to the far side and parked in a secluded spot. Thanks to the thick bushes, it wasn't hard for me to stay hidden. My old binoculars came in handy again as I watched them undress and begin to touch each other. I took out my cell phone and called Jean. "Hello." "Jean, it's John." "Yes, John, I recognize your voice. Where are you right now?" She paused for a second, unsure of what to say. She was a terrible liar. "I'm in the supermarket parking lot, John. Why are you asking?" "Oh, well, that's good to know, Jean, because in 10 seconds, Ray Cotton's Hummer is going to explode into a giant fireball. Good thing you're not in it." "John, what did you say?" 10, 9, 8, 7. I heard her drop the phone. Get out of the car now? Hurry!" Ray was stunned. "What are you talking about? What's going on?" She flung the door open and jumped out, completely naked. Ray followed, and the two of them ran away from the Hummer. I pressed the button on the remote control. There was a loud pop, and orange smoke began billowing from beneath the massive yellow truck. They were standing about 15 meters away from the smoking Hummer when I pulled up in my pickup truck. I threw open the passenger door and told Jean to get in. I looked at Ray through the window and said, "Next time I see you, it'll be at your funeral." Not a single word was spoken during the long drive home. When we arrived, I made her walk from the driveway to the front door without any clothes on. She stood in the middle of the living room, too afraid to move or say anything. Eventually, I looked at her. "Go take a shower and put something on before the kids get back from school." It was a tense evening. We didn't speak at all. Jean went to bed, scared out of her mind, and I fell asleep on the couch. Before leaving for work the next morning, I loaded the box, spring, and mattress into my truck. When I came home from work, I brought back 2 twin beds and several sets of bedding. I set up the beds, and Jean quietly put on the new sheets. This went on for nearly a week. One evening, when the kids weren't home, Jean finally gathered the courage to speak to me. "John, what do you want from me? What do you want me to do?" I didn't say anything at first, just looked up from my reading for a second. She didn't apologize. She didn't make excuses. She didn't whine or beg. I could tell she was waiting for an answer. My first instinct was to kill you both. I was furious about what you did to this family and to me. I had planned to plant 4 sticks of dynamite under his truck, but then I thought about what that would do to the kids. They would have lost not only their mother, but their father too. My revenge wasn't worth that. So instead, I placed a Marine Corps flare under the truck instead of dynamite. I waited for you to end the affair yourself. But you never did. I couldn't take it anymore. I'm still angry, and I struggle with it every day. I don't know what I'm capable of when I'm in that state. She sat quietly, listening to every word. She said nothing and tried not to show any emotion. I continued, "You'll stay here, in the house, and behave like a mother and wife until both children leave for college. You will perform all the duties of a wife and mother except anything sexual. That includes cooking, cleaning, laundry, grocery shopping, and attending all public events. It must always appear that we are a normal family. Neither of us will say a word to our relatives or friends about what happened. I'll provide you with an allowance of $200 per month for your personal expenses, along with whatever money is needed for household maintenance. The day Sarah leaves for college will be the day we get divorced. At that time, I'll give you half the value of the house and half of our savings. I will not pay you alimony." It felt like a prison sentence. I don't think she knew what to say. She sat there, stunned. I figured she was wondering why I didn't just throw her out and set her free, or why I was putting her through this kind of torment. I continued, "I'm doing this mostly for the kids. I want them to have a normal childhood, and I won't let your affair ruin their lives. I'm firm on this, John. There's no negotiating. I know this will sound harsh, and it'll probably be difficult for you to accept, but please listen carefully to the last 2 conditions. They're very important." I could tell she was a little nervous, but she seemed to decide she could handle it. "If you leave before your obligations are fulfilled, I will track you down and kill you. If you have any contact with Ray Cotton, I will find you both and kill you." It was fear and intimidation that I knew would make her accept the terms. I had no intention of actually killing anyone, but I couldn't let her know that. Jean fulfilled her part of the contract. For 6 years, she played the role of the obedient wife and loving mother. I never once had a complaint about her behavior. I had hoped that over time she might offer some sort of explanation, or maybe even an apology.